Welcome to my channel. Crew, buckle up, because what I'm about to share with you is quite possibly the largest bombshell in Sister Wives history. Fans have been speculating for a while, now that Robyn Brown was not just a wife, was not just playing victim, but something much more and much worse. And now, thanks to courtroom testimony as well as insider leaks, the truth is finally beginning to come out. What if I told you that behind the tears, behind the quivering voice, and behind the constant threat of being misunderstood, Robyn was quietly building an empire? That while Christine and Janelle were struggling to keep their kids clothed and fed, Robyn was stacking the deck in her favor, moving money, assets, and power into her own corner, all under the protection of Kody's umbrella. Crew, this isn't speculation anymore. This is evidence. Hard, cold courtroom evidence. The kind of evidence that makes jurors gasp, lawyers glance at one another, and even Kody himself perspire. It started as whispers in the courthouse corridor, whispers of secret LLCs, undisclosed property deeds, and bank transfers that didn't add up. But the whispers grew louder when Christine and Janelle's lawyers brought out what they called the smoking gun. Papers that connected Robyn not just to the family wealth, but to a private empire of her own out in the open. Imagine the betrayal crew. Christine was informed for years there wasn't money for Isabel's surgery. Janelle was informed she couldn't build her home on Coyote Pass. They were informed the family pot was empty. But all along, Robyn's name was quietly added to luxury purchases, secret accounts, and assets the other wives didn't know existed. And here's where it gets even wilder. When these papers were presented in court, Robyn's entire act fell apart. The tears weren't staged this time, they were real. Because the veil finally dropped, and the jury got to witness not a fragile wife, but a woman who may have been orchestrating one of the biggest betrayals in Sister Wives history. But this is just the beginning. In part 2, we're going to break down exactly how Robyn's hidden empire was discovered, what role Kody played in helping her protect it, and why Christine and Janelle's lawyers believe this was the final straw that turned the jury against them. Crew, you won't believe what's about to go down. Crew, when lawyers for Christine and Janelle stood up that morning, no one in the courtroom could have predicted what was about to happen. Up until then, Robyn had relied heavily on her go-to act, the whispery voice, the trembling hands, the tissue held like a lifeline. She presented herself as the innocent wife who wanted nothing but peace, the woman who was stuck in the middle of everybody else's drama. Christine's lawyer slid a stack of papers across the evidence table then. Plaintiff's Exhibit 74, she said. Corporate records, bank statements, and deeds to property directly tied to Robyn Brown. The room wassailed. You could hear papers rustling, the gentle hum of the courtroom lights. And then, gasps. Actual gasps from spectators in the gallery as the first pages were projected onto the big courtroom screen. There it was. Not just my sister wife's closet, the doomed jewelry business everyone already knew about. No, crew, other businesses. Shell businesses, LLCs with names like R&B Holdings and Flagstaff Family Ventures. Accounts that had been getting regular deposits, not from Kody's own personal paycheck, but from the family fund. The same fund Christine and Janelle had been told was bone dry. And if that wasn't enough, the deeds, one after the other, signed in Robyn's name. Land parcels, rental houses, even a cabin up north nobody had ever heard about on the show. Crew, the look on Kody's face said it all. His jaw clenched, his face went white, and for the first time, it was clear he knew they were busted. Robyn's reaction? She tried to hold it together at first. She whispered to her lawyer, dabbed at their eyes with the same tissue. But when the attorney read aloud the deposit dates that matched periods Christine and Janelle were begging for money, the tears came harder. Real panic. Not for the kids. Not for the family, but for her. The lawyer didn't relent. She leaned forward, her voice tight and controlled. Mrs. Brown, even though you testified to no independent income and no assets of your own, can you explain why your signature appears on 3 separate deeds to property purchased with family funds? Robyn stammered. She shook her head. I don't remember signing those. Kody does everything. But the jury wasn't having it. You could see it in their faces. They weren't staring at a victim anymore. They were staring at a liar. Crew, this was the point where the tide turned. The courtroom saw through the tears, the performance. And Christine and Janelle's attorneys? They knew they had just delivered the knockout punch. But that was just the beginning. Because what came next didn't just expose the money, it exposed the plan. In Part 3, we'll uncover how Robyn's so-called hidden empire was more than just financial. It was the strategy that kept Kody under her thumb and the other wives shut out. Trust me, you're not going to want to miss it. Crew, when the courtroom settled down after that explosive reveal, Christine and Janelle's lawyer wasn't finished. The money trail was damning, but what she revealed next showed the empire Robyn had built wasn't just about wealth, it was about power. She pulled up another exhibit, this time emails. Not from accountants, not from banks, but from Kody himself. The subject line? Future family planning, Robyn's direction. What were in them were detailed instructions on how funds from the family account had to be reallocated to create long-term stability for Robyn's household. That's verbatim, folks, from Kody. And what did he send along with those emails? Draft agreements to move control of certain family assets into the hands of Robyn and her children. Think about it. Christine's kids were begging their dad for attention. Janelle's kids were trying to survive while she lived in an RV. And Kody was emailing about the future of only one segment of the family. Robyn's family. That's when the attorney dropped the bombshell line. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this was not survival. This was a plan in collaboration. A plot to divest Christine and Janelle of any entitlement to the family empire and give it all to Robyn's hidden empire. Crew, you could feel the room change. Robyn's mask slipped further. She clutched Kody's arm, her whisper growing frantic. Kody tried to appear defiant, but his sweaty brow betrayed him. The jury leaned forward on the edge of their seats. And that's when the attorney spoke the words that would haunt Robyn for the rest of her life. This wasn't just financial deception. This was betrayal. Betrayal by the woman who claimed she only wanted peace. And the evidence shows she was building her own kingdom behind everyone else's backs. The courtroom was stunned. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about intent, strategy. A long game that painted Robyn as not just complicit, but the architect. Crew, imagine this. Years of following sister wives and thinking Robyn was the innocent bystander, when really she could have been the mastermind all along. Here's the twist, though. We haven't even entered the personal sphere of this empire yet. Because in Part 4, we're going to explore how Robyn used loyalty, manipulation, and Kody's ego as the foundation to hold her empire together, while the rest of the family fell apart. And trust me, this next part is going to make you look at every tear Robyn ever cried on camera differently. Crew, by now the jury had viewed the money. They'd viewed the documents. They'd even viewed Kody's own statements tracing it all back to Robyn. But the most destructive aspect of this empire wasn't built on bank accounts and property deeds. It was built on manipulation, emotional manipulation, loyalty tests that turned a family into pawns on Robyn's chessboard. It was Mindy Jessup, the whistleblower nanny, who testified again. And what she told the courtroom left it reeling. She described nights in that Flagstaff mansion when Kody would come home in a fury after arguing with Christine or Janelle. He'd rave, he'd pace, he'd shout about how disloyal they were. And Robyn, what would she do? She'd placate him, stroke his ego, and then plant the seeds of control. She'd say things like, "You're the boss, Kody. They don't listen to your orders. Maybe it's time you start withholding their access. Make them work for your presence." Crew, can you believe it? Boiling down a father's love to a reward to be handed out like coin. And Kody was listening every time, says Mindy. It wasn't about controlling Christine and Janelle. It was about eliminating them altogether. Mindy testified that Robyn consistently portrayed herself as the loyal one, the wife who truly respected Kody's crown, the wife who understood his burden. And subtly, day after day, she made herself indispensable. But this is where it gets terrifying. Robyn, according to Mindy, didn't only mess with Kody's head. She used the children as weapons. When Gabrielle and Garrison would ask where Kody was, Robyn would say, "Your dad's just trying to keep us safe." The other wives don't understand. They make it harder for him. Divide and conquer, guys. That's how you take over an empire. Not just by taking control of the money, but by taking control of the loyalty of the king and poisoning everyone else's minds. The lawyer hit it on the head. This wasn't the story of a woman trapped in the middle. This was the story of a woman scheming her way to the top. The faces of the jurors said it all. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Others scribbled furiously in their notebooks. And for the first time, Robyn's tears did not bring sympathy. They brought suspicion. But if you think this was the worst of it, crew, you'd be wrong. Because what came next took away the final layer of the empire, the indulgences, the cost. The proof that while the other wives got by, Robyn lived like royalty. In Part 5, we dive into the jaw-dropping spending and lifestyle evidence that showed the true cost of Robyn's empire. And it will blow your mind. Crew, if there was any reasonable doubt left in the jury, it dissipated when the spending records came up on the courtroom projector. Up until then, Robyn's entire defense had been tears and apologies. I didn't know. Kody handled all of that. I was just trying to keep the family together. And then Christine and Janelle's lawyer pulled out what she called the receipts of betrayal. Number 1, high-end shopping. Dozens of purchases at luxury retailers. Nordstrom, Neiman Marcus, and even Victoria's Secret. Thousands of dollars. Being spent while Christine was scrambling around for moving truck money, and Janelle was rationing food in the hopes of affording her RV. And then there was the jewelry. Court records showed Kody had purchased Robyn some extremely expensive pieces, not with his own money, but with money siphoned off from the family LLC. One necklace alone cost over $4,000. Crew, imagine Janelle's face, sitting in an RV with her children, being told she couldn't afford plumbing while Robyn was wearing diamonds bought with family funds. But the pièce de résistance? The house. A 5-bedroom, 2-acre Flagstaff home where Robyn and Kody lived like royalty, while the rest of them were left high and dry. The mortgage, utilities, and even nanny payments, all traced back to the same secreted accounts. The attorney gazed at the jury and gave the line that sliced through every alibi. While Janelle was arving, while Christine was begging for financial transparency, while Meri was alone at home in an empty rental, Robyn was living in a palace. A palace paid for with money that didn't belong to her. Crew, the courtroom was as quiet as it could be. Not a whisper, not a cough. Everyone's eyes were focused on Robyn's face as the truth was revealed. She cried tears, but this time, Noon leaned forward in sympathy. They leaned back in disgust. And Kody? He tried to interrupt. He murmured something about taking care of the kids and family responsibility, but the judge cut him off. The evidence shouted down any justification he could fabricate. The jury had one perspective. Robyn's covert empire wasn't built on manipulation alone. It was financed by betrayal. But just when you think the evidence couldn't get any worse, it does. Because what attorneys for Christine and Janelle presented next showed that this empire wasn't just financial fraud, it was emotional abuse. Crew, in Part 6, will learn how Robyn and Kody turned Coyote Pass itself into a tool of control, manipulating a family dream into a nightmare that destroyed everyone. And trust me, you won't be able to comprehend the size of this betrayal. Crew, if there was ever a symbol for the Brown family dream, it was Coyote Pass. They stood on that vacant land for years and said into the cameras, "This is where our future begins." Homes for each wife, kids running around together. One big plural family building their legacy together as a unit. But in court, that dream turned to dust. Because Coyote Pass wasn't simply property, it was the means Robyn and Kody used to consolidate their power. Christine and Janelle's lawyer presented documents showing that while the wives were made to think the land was being divided equally behind the scenes, the valuable parcels were conveyed into Kody's and, you guessed it, Robyn's controlled entities. There were property maps on the courtroom wall. Highlighted in red were the acres that had Robyn's name on them. Crew, it was the good land. Closest to water, easiest to develop, and the most valuable parcels. And Janelle's parcel? A rocky, uneven mess that would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars more to even prepare to build on. And Christine's? Left hanging in the balance, her name never even finished being written on a deed. And then there was the testimony that shocked them all. Mindy Jessup, Thanesider nanny, testified that she had overheard Robyn and Kody one night, late, laughing about how the others will never build here. It's too pricey for them, Kody had said, according to her. They'll tire of it. And when they do, it's all ours. Crew, can you believe? The land that was supposed to unite them was deliberately crafted to exclude Christine and Janelle. The lawyer drove it home. This wasn't a dream. This was exclusion. While Christine was begging for a fresh start, and Janelle was investing every last cent she had in it, the defendants were secretly ensuring Coyote Pass would never belong to anyone but them. The jurors' expressions were priceless. Shock, anger, disbelief. And for Christine and Janelle, seated side by side, it was painful vindication. Years of suspicion were finally borne out in black and white. Coyote Pass wasn't the dream. It was the trap. And Robyn held the key. But crew, if you considered property scams and land deeds to be the pinnacle of betrayal, think again. Because in Part 7, we explore the human toll, the heart-wrenching testimony from Christine and Janelle themselves. Words that brought the courtroom to tears and made it plain once and for all that Robyn's empire wasn't all about money. It was about breaking spirits. Staff so far, proof had been documents, bank records, insider testimony. Cold hard facts. But when Christine and Janelle themselves testified on the stand, the courtroom transformed. Suddenly, this wasn't about figures. It was about lives. It was about suffering. Christine went first. She walked slowly to the witness stand, hands trembling a little as she swore in. But then she started speaking, and her voice was firm, clear. She spoke to the jury and told them about the years she'd lived believing that the dream of Coyote Pass had been real. "I bought that land because I believed it was our future," she said. "I believed that my children would grow their families there with relatives. But what I didn't know was that while I was pinching and saving, Robyn was building her own future at my expense." She described the night she knew it was all a fabrication, the night she went up to Kody and asked if her name was actually on the deed. And he waved her away, saying, "Don't worry about it. Robyn and I have it under control." Christine's voice shook. That's when it hit me. It wasn't about family anymore. It was about control. Crew, the jurors' eyes welled. Christine was not melodramatic. Christine was not revengeful. She was broken up. And that genuine pain was more valuable than any spreadsheet could ever be. And then there was Janelle. She emerged onto the stand quietly resolute. She did not scream. She did not need to. She told the jury all that had taken place while Robyn had a 5-bedroom home. Of asking Kody for help and being informed that there was nothing to be had from the family account. "I invested hundreds of thousands in that house," Janelle said, lying in tears. "And every time I thought we'd actually get around to constructing, I was told it wasn't possible. That we were penniless. And Robyn washing a nanny, buying jewelry, living nicely, and I was stuck having to tell my children we couldn't even get a bathroom." The lawyer asked her the question, full of tension. "How did that make you feel?" Janelle paused, her eyes locked on Kody, who sat impassive at the defense table. And then she spoke. "It made me feel worthless. Like my contribution, my sacrifices didn't matter. Like I was just a placeholder while Kody built his real life with Robyn." Crew, those 3 words cut deeper than any line in the books. The jurors inched forward. Even the judge seemed serious. And for the first time, Robyn's tears took second place. Christine's and Janelle's truths. But what's interesting is that their testimonies were not emotional. They were calculated. They painted a picture of betrayal so profound, so intimate, that the jury couldn't help but see Robyn not as a victim, but as the mastermind of their misery. And yet, crew, as powerful as their testimonies were, the courtroom was not ready for what was to come. Because the final witness would blow the whole thing wide open, showing that Robyn's empire wasn't just emotional blackmail or greed for cash, but premeditated dishonesty from the very beginning. Crew, the courtroom was already heavy with emotion after hearing from Christine and Janelle. But no one was prepared for what the next witness had to say. This was the tipping point that took the trial from agonizing reality to undeniable proof. The prosecution's final insider was a former financial advisor to the Browns. He stood up, pulled his tie tight, and introduced himself in a calm voice, and then he uttered the words that sent chills through the room. "I was hired to help the Browns manage their business accounts. But before long, I realized there were 2 books. 2 books, crew. Think about that. One group was given to Christine, Janelle, and even Meri, books that made the family look poor, just getting by, barely making ends meet. And the other? A hidden book that traced the money all the way into a shell company. A company owned by Kody and Robyn," he went on. He testified that he went to Kody about the discrepancy, only to be told, "This isn't their business. It's ours." They wouldn't understand. And here is where it all blew up. He had drafts of emails between Robyn, Kody, and their accountant, emails in which Robyn was personally authorizing large withdrawals from the family funds into this shadow account herself. She wasn't just sitting back passively, people. She had her fingerprints all over the empire. The jury gasped. Robyn's tears instantly evaporated. Kody's face went red, slamming his fist on the table before his attorney pulled him back into his seat. It was chaos. The judge had to strike the gavel 3 times to restore order. But the damage was done. The narrative that Robyn and Kody had built for so long, that Robyn was a naive, clueless wife who never laid hands on the money, fell apart before everyone's eyes. The lawyer looked the jury directly in the face and said to them, "This is not mismanagement. This is fraud. This is betrayal. And it was cooked up at the highest level by the very people who swore they were constructing a family dream." Crew, mouths dropped. Gallery viewers mouthed in shock. And Christine and Janelle? They straightened their posture, their own hurt at last justified. But if you thought that was the end, you'd be wrong. Because in Part 9, we'll take you inside the defense's desperate attempt to spin this disaster, and Kody's meltdown that might have killed them for good. Crew, after the testimony of the financial advisor, the courtroom was electric. The jury had seen the money trail, the double books, and Robyn's direct involvement. It was a knockout punch. And that's when Kody Brown did the very thing his lawyers begged him not to do. He lost his temper. During cross-examination, Kody interrupted without being invited, shouting at the witness, "You don't get it! You weren't there! I was defending this family." The judge pounded his gavel. "Mr. Brown, you're out of order." But Kody refused to give up. He accused Christine and Janelle, shaking with rage, finger pointed at them. "They betrayed me. They never gave me respect as the leader of this family. Robyn was the one person who remained loyal to me. Of course I stood up for her." Crew, the 2 words echoed with a cry of culpability. The jury's eyes bulged. The courtroom became quiet. In a single burst, Kody confirmed everything Christine and Janelle had been saying all these years, that his loyalty was no longer to the family, but to Robyn herself. And what about Robyn? She hid her face in her hands, mascara streaked, but the jury was no longer buying it. The tears that had provoked tears of sympathy before now seemed like make-believe. The courtroom gallery gasped with shock. Even the judge had touring for silence. The defense struggled to spin it. Robyn's attorney argued the women were jilted former lovers, that what they had here was a family squabble masquerading as a lawsuit. Had tried to make Robyn out as victim, trapped in Kody's shadow, not able to say no to his decisions. But the question was simple. The papers, the emails, the testimony, and now the breakdown of Kody all told a different story. One where Robyn wasn't the victim. She was the empire builder. Crew, witnessing the castle walls come down brick by brick, Robyn in the middle, grasping the crown she had built with the sacrifice of other human beings. But just when it seemed that the trial was bubbling over, the prosecution took a final stab. They announced that they had one final piece of evidence to present. Evidence so damning that it could eliminate the last shred of Robyn's defense. The judge called for a brief recess. The jury leaned back, stunned. Christine and Janelle whispered together, their faces both anxious and hopeful. And Robyn? Her hands shook as she clutched Kody's arm, whispering frantically, her mask finally cracking for good. Crew, in Part 10, will reveal that final piece of evidence, the moment the courtroom gasped, and Robyn's hidden empire came crashing down once and for all. In Part 8, we'll reveal that testimony, the moment the courtroom gasped, and the Brown family myth shattered for good. Crew, when the judge reopened court, the air in that courtroom was crackling. Everyone knew the prosecution had been saving one last piece of evidence, and the whispers in the gallery were deafening. What in the world could remain to cap the double books, the shell companies, and Kody's meltdown? Then the attorney stood, a slender folder in his hand, calm, confident, ready to deliver the coup de grace. "Your Honor," she said, "the plaintiffs enter into evidence Exhibit 93, a personal email exchange between Kody Brown and Robyn Brown, obtained by discovery." The emails came up on the screen. Crew, the words were undeniable. Kody had written, "Once we move everything into K&R Holdings, Christine and Janelle won't have a leg to stand on. Let them chase their dreams. We'll have the reality." And Robyn's reply? "Good. We need to think long-term. The land, the money, the show, everything needs to funnel to us. They'll tire eventually. They always do." Crew, the courtroom erupted in gasps. Audible gasps. Even the judge's eyebrows went up. This wasn't spin, this wasn't manipulation, this wasn't interpretation by someone else. These were Robyn's own words, her own written admission that the empire wasn't an accident. It was the plan. Christine and Janelle were frozen, tears in their eyes, as years of suspicion were finally realized. The jury? They looked outraged. Some of them shook their heads. Others took notes like this was the final nail in the coffin. Robyn broke down, weeping into her hands. But this time, nobody reached for tissues. Nobody was buying the act. The mask was off. The empire was exposed, and Kody? He slumped back in his seat, his face pale, as if he knew it was all over. The lawyer's voice rang out, "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this wasn't a family dream gone bad. This was a betrayal from within." Robyn's secret empire wasn't secret at all. It was built in plain sight, with greed, lies, and manipulation, until today. Crew, the courtroom had never been more electrifying. This was it. The end game. The Brown family dream wasn't just dead. It had been murdered by greed, and now the murderers had been unmasked. But here's the twist. The jury had yet to have their say. Would they penalize Kody and Robyn for their treachery? Or would the empire be able to cling on one last time? Robyn's mask was ripped off. It was in the jury's hands. The courtroom was packed. Christine and Janelle held hands, their fingers intertwined. Kody leaned forward, his knee jittering, his lips moving in urgent whispers. Robyn clutched a rosary, her tears falling silently. The air itself was thick enough that you could feel the pressure of it weighing down. The judge looked down at the folded paper in his hand. Has Thedgery reached a verdict? The foreperson stood up. "We have, Your Honor." The paper was passed to the judge. He read it, his expression not betraying anything. Then he spoke the words that ended an era. "On the count of breach of fiduciary duty, we find for the plaintiffs." Christine tightened her hold on Janelle's hand. The courtroom buzzed, but the judge continued. "On the count of financial fraud and unjust enrichment, we find for the plaintiffs." Kody's head dropped into his hands. "And on the count of intentional infliction of emotional distress, we find for the plaintiffs." Crew, it was a clean sweep. Every count, every claim the jury had found for Christine and Janelle. The gasps, the murmurs, the whispered finally circulated throughout the courtroom. But it wasn't over. The judge then announced damages. Millions, sufficient to warrant the sale of Robyn's house, enough to reclaim what had been stolen from Christine and Janelle. But money wasn't the real reward. No, Crew, the real payoff was vindication. Christine and Janelle had been told for years that they were bitter, dramatic, disloyal, that they were making it all up, but now, a jury of their peers had said loud and clear, "You were right. You were wronged, and justice is yours." Christine's tears were no longer of pain. They were of relief. Janelle leaned back, finally able to breathe. And Robyn? She collapsed in her seat, her sobs ringing out through the courtroom. Kody stormed out before the judge even adjourned, yelling about betrayal, about injustice, but his words fell on deaf ears. Crew, the Brown family dream was dead. Coyote Pass wasn't a legacy anymore. It was evidence. And the empire Robyn had built on greed and manipulation had finally crumbled under the weight of truth. But there's the twist. Although Christine and Janelle departed vindicated, the story wasn't quite over, because outside those courtroom doors, the consequences were only just beginning. The family's public image, the TLC cameras, the children stuck in the crossfire, it would all now bear the brunt of this verdict. And in Part 12, we'll pull back the curtain on the aftermath. How this courtroom victory sent shockwaves through the Brown family, the fans, and the entire Sister Wives Legacy crew. As Christine and Janelle walked out of that courthouse with tears of relief in their eyes, it wasn't just a legal victory. It was history. The women who had for so long been silenced, dismissed, and gaslit were now vindicated in the eyes of the world. Outside, however, the cameras were waiting. Reporters shouted questions. Fans shouted support. And somewhere in the chaos, Kody wordlessly pushed through, his empire crumbling behind him. Robyn, pale and trembling, followed close behind, her hidden kingdom now exposed for the world to see. Yet even as the verdict brought justice, it left one burning question dangling in the air. What's next? Because this isn't the end of a trial. This is the beginning of the fallout. TLC cameras, contracts, book deals, fractured kids, shattered trust. The empire might be done, but the battle for the future of the Brown family is just beginning. Crew, if the courtroom was explosive, just wait for what's coming when cameras roll again. So stay with us. Because the truth about Coyote Pass may have destroyed the Brown family dream. But the secrets we've uncovered are only the beginning of an even more sinister story. And trust me, you are not going to want to miss what's coming. We'll learn in the verdict. And trust me, gang, you won't want to miss how this story unfolds.